What if the person who most quietly commands a room did not win that power by charm or showmanship, but by learning a discipline most people mistake for loneliness? Listen all the way through, and I will give you a practical Stoic map for becoming quietly magnetic. One practice, revealed near the end, that explains why presence beats performance every time. Hold that question like a small coin you will spend later, and you will see why it pays. A brief, humane note before we begin. This conversation is an invitation to reflection and practice, not a prescription for your life. I am offering philosophical tools and time-tested habits. For specific personal or medical advice, consult appropriate professionals. With that settled, let us walk slowly into what may look like charm, but is in truth patient architecture, the construction of life that need not shout to be heard. People often confuse attraction with spectacle, bright clothes, loud anecdotes, viral confidence. The world rewards flash. But when the applause dies, the person who remains is rarely the loudest. They are the one whose life has internal coherence, habits that align with values, practices that steady attention, small disciplines that compound into dignity. This is not a trick. It is quiet engineering of the self. Imagine a building that does not need neon signs. Its proportions, materials, and placement make people stop and look. The same principle applies to character. The Stoics would add, without malice, that such architecture begins inside the mind, clarity about what matters, and the courage to let unimportant noise fall away. We begin with a diagnosis of our time. Attention is a scarce commodity and an easily purchased commodity. Most people exchange it for dopamine currency, likes, claps, momentary visibility. Stoicism, oddly practical and curiously modern, suggests a different economy. Invest attention where it compounds. The payoff is not a headline, but an unforced authority. People look for someone consistent, steady, present. That presence is magnetic because it promises reliability. In social terms, predictability of virtue is strangely attractive. To make this concrete, we will move from mistake to method to practice. First, the mistake. We overvalue impression and undervalue character. Second, the method. Cultivate internal goods, judgment, temperance, courage, justice. Third, practice. Daily habits, small and unglamorous, that reorder your responses until your presence does the talking. Consider a simple, clarifying experiment. Enter a room and count two things: how many people are loudly competing for attention and how many are calmly listening. If you watch closely, you will notice that the listeners, given time, are the ones others seek after the noise fades. Why? People crave being seen and understood. The person who gives that, without asking for currency in return, becomes a locus of trust. Trust collects like dew on a morning leaf. It is silent. It is cumulative. It is the social compound interest that the Stoics urge us to care for. Now, let us approach the core. What are the inner moves that produce this outward calm? Begin with independence, not as prideful withdrawal, but as the discipline of self-validation. Authentic independence means your worth does not hinge on applause. Your aims are not applause-shaped. Imagine a ship with its own ballast. It navigates storms better because its center of gravity is internal, not subject to every gust. Practically, cultivate moments of solitude where you make decisions without a crowd's echo. Ask, what are my principles? Where do I place my dignity? Write them down. Test them in small choices before you require them to hold in larger crises. This is not isolation. It is sovereignty, a quiet foundation from which compassionate relationships can spring. The Stoic teacher Epictetus urged us to become your own master. He did not mean be unloving. He meant be steady enough to love without need. From independence flows elegance, not the decorative kind, but a composed poise that signals deliberation. Body language is hardly trivial. Standing with your shoulders relaxed, breathing with even rhythm, making steady eye contact. These are small physical habits that shape perception. Picture a room where half the people fidget and the other half move with measured calm. Which group will be trusted with decisions? Which will be counted on when tension rises? Elegance is restraint. It is saying less and meaning more. Practice deliberate stillness. Pause for 2 breaths before answering impulsively. Allow silence its weight. Over time, the pause will become an instrument. People will begin to notice that your words tend to arrive at the right moment. That timeliness builds a quiet reputation. There is also refinement in the little things, the so-called soft details, hygiene, a thoughtful scent, careful grooming. These are not vanity. They are respect for the shared space of others. A pleasant, subtle scent is a social punctuation mark. It does not announce you. It prolongs the memory of you. The Stoics counseled moderation in outward appearance as a reflection of inner order. When personal care is attentive but not excessive, it signals a life of habits, not hysteria. The world responds to that signal because it is practical. Someone who can steward themselves is more likely to steward relationships and responsibilities well. Presence, real, undistracted presence, is perhaps the hardest habit to acquire and the most rewarding. To be present is to invest your attention fully in the moment. It is a moral act because it honors the other person with time. Our devices, our multitasking, our internal monologues steal presence. A person who offers undivided attention becomes rare, and rarity becomes value. It is a paradox. Offering your attention freely makes you socially costly in a good way. Practice with small gestures. Put your phone face down when someone speaks. Let your eyes track the person, not the script in your head. Ask questions, then listen as if the answer matters because it does. Presence is not performative listening. It is the slow cultivation of empathy. At this point, a cautionary story is useful. There was once a promising executive, let us call him Daniel, who mistook visibility for influence. He saturated meetings with clever quips, sought the camera, and curated his persona relentlessly. For a while, he soared, promotions, praise, and an online following. But visibility without ballast is brittle. When a crisis fell, a product failure requiring measured leadership, Daniel's persona fractured. His quickness to speak lacked the depth needed for sober judgment. His colleagues, who had admired his flash, found they could not rely on him when it mattered. The lesson is simple and cold. Spectacle may win short attention, but when stakes rise, people turn to steadiness. Daniel's fall was preventable. It was not the lack of competence, but the absence of practiced composure. Contrast that with a delayed awakening story. Maria, a mid-level manager, lived on the opposite end of the spectrum. Quiet and meticulous, she rarely sought spotlight. A personal health crisis forced her to step back and re-examine everything. Through journaling, modest meditation, and reading Marcus Aurelius, she began to reorder priorities. She learned to speak less and listen more. Her team noticed not because she performed a new persona, but because she became reliably present. Her calm in emergencies and consistent care in small matters made her indispensable. Over years, trust accumulated into influence. Maria's transformation was not glamorous. It was faithful practice. The Stoic idea that character is formed by repeated acts found real proof in her life. Let me give you one more arc. A transformation that worked because it married philosophy to craft. Consider a young craftsman named Lynn who repaired old houses. She studied structure and materials, but also people. Lynn noticed that clients most prized not the fanciest finish, but the trust they felt in someone who showed up on time and explained options plainly. Lynn adopted habits: punctuality, clear communication, small rituals that signaled care, a clean workspace, explained timelines, photographed progress. Her business grew not because she boasted, but because she built reliability into every transaction. Lynn's work became a moving lesson. Slow, steady, visible care is a form of attraction far more durable than the flashy ad. The Stoic virtues, prudence, justice, temperance, fortitude, showed up in her invoices and her steady hands. These stories map onto practices you can begin today. The Stoics emphasize the unity of theory and practice. Philosophy without exercise is a lamp without oil. Begin with daily micro-habits. Spend 5 minutes each morning reflecting on a single value you will practice that day: patience, listening, humility. Keep your commitments small and honor them. Consistency grows like muscle. Pause before replying in anger or defensiveness. The pause redirects energy from reaction to choice. Journal one sentence each evening about where you were present and where you were absent. Over weeks, these exercises shift the nervous system's default from frenetic reactivity to considered response. Notably, the point is not to manufacture charm, but to cultivate presence. The byproduct is that people begin to be drawn to you. Now let us examine emotional intelligence and social awareness as a combined engine. Emotional intelligence is not manipulation. It is understanding your interior weather, so you need not be swept away by it. Social awareness is reading the room without losing your center. Together, they produce social fluency that reads like grace. In practical terms, check your arousal level before difficult conversations. Notice your breathing. When someone appears upset, mirror their tone briefly and then lead toward steadiness. Remember Epictetus. It's not what happens to you, but how you interpret it that matters. Translate that into social strategy. You can choose to interpret a stinging comment as a threat or as data. Both are true. One is useful, the other corrosive. Compassion is an integral, often misunderstood pillar. Stoicism is sometimes caricatured as cold rationality. In truth, it insists on ethical action. Care and practical kindness are central. Compassion here is not sentimental mush, but calibrated engagement. It means giving your time without expecting repayment and setting boundaries so generosity is sustainable, not draining. The heartbeat of compassion is small: a patient ear, a gentle correction, a sacrifice of convenience. These acts are not dramatic. They are stealthy seeds that grow into deep ties. When you cultivate compassion, you also cultivate trust, the social currency of long relationships. We must also speak of mystery. or what we might call prudent self-disclosure. Oversharing is social noise. Restraint is a form of generosity. When you reveal too quickly, you exhaust curiosity. When you reveal too little, you seem remote. Balance is the craft. Hold some stories for a later season of the relationship. Allow people to earn intimacy. This creates narrative tension, not manipulation, but integrity. People who are intentionally opaque in small, healthy ways invite curiosity, and curiosity sustains interest. The Stoic practice of silence, speaking only when words serve, is a tool here. Say what matters, and let silence hold its gravity. Humor and joy deserve their own place. Stoic philosophy is not a grim denial of pleasure. It teaches the art of seeing what is under our control and responding with equanimity. Laughter is an expression of resilience. When you can laugh at your mistakes without dissolving into self-contempt, you model a kind of psychological hygiene others find appealing. Humor lubricates social life. Joy is magnetic because it signals approachability. Cultivate an inner standard that allows play within limits. That lightness, balanced with seriousness, is precisely the mix that draws people in. Another essential habit is cultural curiosity. The person who reads widely, listens deeply to other traditions, and resists intellectual tribalism becomes interesting because they can make connections others cannot. Not knowledge for prestige, but knowledge for understanding. Engage a culture or a craft not to collect trivia, but to deepen empathy and nuance. The Stoic philosopher sees the world as a classroom. Make every conversation a lesson. This depth of perspective enhances your conversational presence and signals a mind that is both humble and capacious. Self-care and consistency are twins. Taking care of your body, regulating sleep, nourishing movement, common practices. These are not indulgences, but the infrastructure for steady presence. The world entrusts its demands to those who can sustain them. If you burn out, your presence is a brittle facade. Create routines that protect bandwidth for meaningful engagement. Consistency in small matters, showing up, returning a call, keeping word, accumulates into a reputation of reliability. The Stoics advise we should be judged by our actions, not our rhetoric. Reliability is simply that principle in daily clothes. At this stage you may ask, which single habit explains so much of the difference between bluster and magnetism? Here, I return to the coin you held earlier. The habit is attention disciplined by purpose. That is, the practice of directing one's full attention to the present task, person, or principle, and doing so repeatedly until it becomes a default. Attention ordered by purpose is the crucible of presence. When attention is undivided and anchored to values, your speech becomes more precise, your actions more aligned, and your silences more meaningful. Attention is the battery. Purpose is the circuit. Combined, they power a presence that does not need to advertise itself. You will notice a pattern. None of these items is glamorous. They are not viral tactics. They are habits whose compound interest pays out over years. The paradox is that in a culture that prizes instant impact, the slow accrual of dignity becomes the rarest and therefore the most magnetic quality. The Stoic sage does not strive for fame. He or she strives for excellence in ordinary acts. The reward is not empty applause, but the inner peace that comes from coherence between belief and action and the social gravitas that follows. How does one begin? I will give you a small practical program you can do in 30 days. Not a flashy makeover, but a disciplined adjustment. Start by choosing one value to practice each week. Presence, punctuality, restraint, listening. Each morning, take 5 minutes to set an intention for that value. During the day, catch your attention wandering and gently return it. Each evening, record one instance where you lived the value and one where you failed. Do this without judgment. The point is data, not guilt. In week 4, combine values. Practice presence in meetings while honoring punctuality and demonstrating a modest, well-chosen humor. The habits will begin to link. Attention strengthens presence. Presence enables compassion. Compassion builds trust. Trust yields influence. The chain is not mystical. It is human psychology, practiced patiently. I must also speak on humility and the avoidance of performative stoicism. Stoic practice that becomes a badge of superiority is counterfeit. True stoicism recognizes its own fallibility. When you practice these habits, do so as an experiment, not as a sermon. Invite feedback. If someone points out that your calm feels aloof, attend to it. The goal is connectivity, not self-elevation. The aim is to become more human, not more distant. The Stoics themselves were not austere automata. They were people with attachments and mistakes who recommended temperance as a way to keep attachments healthy. Let us return now to the opening claim and close the loop. The person who seems effortlessly magnetic acquired that state by disciplining attention toward purpose and by accumulating small practices of reliability, presence, and care. The single habit I promised to reveal, attention disciplined by purpose, is not secret. It is obvious, which is why many miss it. To practice it, choose a daily anchor. Breath, walk, morning reflection. Use it to align the day. Defend a small time of solitude weekly, and in conversation, make undivided attention your currency. Over months, people will notice. They will not necessarily understand the mechanism. They will feel the result. Before we finish, consider one last story, a composite but true to life. A teacher named Ahmed spent years in classrooms where performance was loud and rewarded. He began, in mid-career, to focus each class not on dazzling demonstrations, but on listening, to student questions, to silences, to confusion. Ahmed learned to answer with short, precise remarks and to encourage students to solve problems together. Over time, his classroom climate changed. Students felt safer, discussions deepened, and the teacher's influence spread beyond his room into the school's culture. He did not seek a title or recognition. He sought better learning. That is the arc we have described repeatedly. Quiet practice yields structural change. Influence follows service, not the other way around. A few practical caveats. Practicing these habits will not make life easy. You will still face loss, error, and injustice. Stoicism does not promise smooth sailing. It offers tools for navigation. The point is not to evade feeling, but to be able to feel without being overwhelmed. Also, social dynamics vary. Not every environment rewards quiet steadiness immediately. Sometimes you may need to pair steadiness with strategic visibility. There is no shame in learning the language of your context while keeping your inner standard. Adaptation, after all, is itself a Stoic skill. As we close, let me give you 3 compressed takeaways to carry forward. First, invest attention where it compounds. Choose presence over performance. Second, practice small, daily rituals that confirm your values. Consistency breeds trust. Third, Balance compassion with boundaries. Generosity without limits corrodes reliability. These are not slogans. They are methods to be embodied. If you wish to continue this work, the next chapter is natural. How to translate quiet authority into ethical leadership without losing humility. In the following conversation, we can examine concrete leadership situations, difficult conversations, hiring choices, crisis communication, and practice applying these Stoic habits to them. For now, take a breath. Notice one place where you can be more present today. Try it and observe what changes. Remember that transformation is the slow accrual of small acts. The world will notice, not because you asked, but because your life became steadier, kinder, and truer to the values you choose. Go gently, be steady. Let your quiet work do the loudest things.